Congressman, good to be with you. Let me quote from a little bit more about what former Attorney General Eric Schmidt said today. He said that the Biden administration engaged in, quote, the largest speech censorship operation in recent history. Discovery obtained by Missouri and Louisiana demonstrated that the Biden administration's coordination with social media companies and collusion with non-governmental organizations to censor speech was far more pervasive and destructive than ever known. What do you think was the big takeaway from today?
No, that's exactly it. They called it the vast censorship enterprise. Jonathan Turley in our first hearing 6 weeks ago called it censorship by surrogate. And of course, when we had the two Democrats who were journalists, Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, they called it the censorship industrial complex. And the key term in each of those three categorizations of this, or the way they describe it, is the term censorship. And here's what's interesting, John. In today's hearing, the Democrat members of the committee tried to strike from the record Senator Schmidt's testimony and Attorney General Landry's testimony. So first they say there's no censorship really happening here, and then they try to censor the testimony and remove it from the record because we followed custom and they didn't answer questions, as is always the custom when you have a senator and a former member come in front of Congress. That I think just describes what the Democrats are really up to.
Congressman, welcome to you. It's Sandra here. This was also a moment when Rep. Stacey Blaskett, the Democrat, responded to allegations that the Biden administration and social media are out there censoring conservative voices. Listen.
That allegation is nonsense. As we discussed extensively in the hearings, as the chairman has said before, social media companies, deep pocket, private companies, social media companies actually amplify conservative voices.
Your response to that, Congressman?
I mean, it's just not accurate. And everyone knows it. Anyone with common sense knows it. And of course, Mr. Sauer, who's involved with the litigation, was the solicitor and argued these cases and did the depositions. He had the facts to show that's not the case. Most of the censorship is going against conservatives. But frankly, guys, even if it wasn't, if it was the other way around, I'd be just as mad about it, because the First Amendment is for all 330-some million Americans. That's what the First Amendment's about. It's not this idea that, oh, the smart people get to censor what we regular folks can't understand. Baloney. That is not how the First Amendment works, but that's how the Democrats now want it to work, and that to me is the most frightening thing. So think about it. 3 weeks ago, we have two journalists as testifying, and Democrats asked those journalists, who are your sources? Today, Democrats in the committee say we want to strike from the record the testimony from witnesses, but they say, oh, no, we're not out to do any harm to the Constitution or any censorship. It makes absolutely no sense what they're up to.
So, Congressman, over the last couple of years, anybody who ever questioned whether or not it was appropriate to vaccinate teens or children was skewered by this administration, by Democrats, by most of the left-leaning media. But now we have the WHO coming out and saying, well, you know, looks like we may be revising our vaccine guidance for teens and children, and that they may not need to get a COVID vaccination. After everything that has happened over the last 2 years, what do you make of that about-face?
Well, because the truth is the truth. And remember, those were the things that the government was pressuring social media platforms to censor. Government pressured social media platforms to censor anyone who said this thing may have come from a lab. Government pressured social media platforms to censor anyone who said it was American tax dollars used in the lab. Government pressured social media platforms to censor anyone who said that, oh, if you get the vaccine, you can't get the virus, and disputed that or said you wouldn't be able to transmit the virus. So all those things that turned out to be true, the government was pressuring social media to take those down, not let people share them, not let people like them. Visibility filter was the term the big tech companies used. That is the scary part. And oh, now when you have someone come and testify like 3 weeks ago, Matt Taibbi, and talks about all that, guess what happens? While he's testifying, the IRS is knocking on his door, at his home. So, and yet the Democrats say, oh, there's no weaponization of government. The American people know there has certainly been a turning of these agencies on the very people, the American citizen, turning on these agencies on the very people they are supposed to serve.
Congressman, so where are we with all the Matt Taibbi demanding answers? You've given them a deadline. They've been silent. Matt Taibbi, understandably, has been silent, waiting on anything. But where are we? I mean, was Matt Taibbi targeted by the IRS when they showed up at his home following Twitter files?
Sandra, two things. One, everyone I've brought this up to, everyone I've talked to says no one thinks it's chance. No one thinks it's a coincidence. Everyone thinks this was done for intimidation reasons. This was done as some kind of targeting. But it would be real easy for the IRS to answer. Just call up the agent, the person who knocked on the door, whoever that is, call them up, say, hey, what was going on here? Just give us the answer. And if it is chance, then just tell us. But tell us what it is. I don't know how it takes so long to figure this out. But yet we have not received anything back from the Treasury Department, from Ms. Yellen.
What happens if they don't make your deadline? What happens if they don't make your deadline?
Well, then we'll ask, we may look to subpoena the documents, any communications relative to this situation. We may want to talk with folks. Mr. Warfal's the new guy there. I don't know why he doesn't come out and tell us what's going on. What's going on in your agency? After all, this is not just any agency. This is probably the most feared agency that Americans in our government. When you get a call from the IRS, it's like, oh, sugar, what's going on here? So you would think the IRS would give us an answer.
Yeah, I've never used the word sugar in relation to a call like that.
We're on a family-friendly show here, guys.
The only thing that the IRS is telling us is they're pointing us toward their website, which says how to know if it's really an IRS agent who's knocking on your door in the contained policy. But the Wall Street Journal editorial board, Congressman, thinks that the weaponization of government committee is making progress. It wrote this in an editorial today. Democrats are denouncing the House GOP investigation into the weaponization of government, but maybe that's because Republicans are getting somewhere. The bigger question is, when did the IRS start to dispatch agents for surprise house calls? As far as we know, Matt Taibbi was not under investigation. He didn't owe any taxes. Money was owed him. There might have been some problem with filing a 2021 tax return that his accountant was having, but there doesn't seem to be anything there that would trigger some up-close and personal service from the IRS.
Call his accountant, call him. He's an American citizen. Treat him with respect. Don't do this. And understand, too, while that's happening the day before Matt Taibbi learns we issued this report, Matt Taibbi learns that the FTC had written Twitter and asked Twitter, who are the journalists you're talking to, and named Mr. Taibbi personally. And Mr. Schellenberger, who then came and testified. God bless them, they're brave guys, who then came and testified after they already knew the FTC was naming him in a letter. One agency going after him, the next day another agency comes after him, and in between that, the Democrats ask him, who are your sources? Such a deal. I mean, that is not supposed to happen in the United States of America, and that is why we're concerned, and that is why this committee is devoted to doing the things and doing the work that we think needs to be done.
All right. Well, that was news, because if they don't respond to that deadline, which they very well might not, you're saying a subpoena could be next. We
want the information. We want to know what happened.
Got it. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
We'll stay in touch. Thank you.